Dr. Mate frequently describes individuals struggling with addiction as inhabitants of the kingdom of hungry ghosts, a poignant and powerful image drawn directly from ancient Buddhist lore. In this evocative symbolic view, these mythical creatures are depicted with tiny, perpetually narrow mouths and throats, coupled with enormous, insatiable stomachs, eternally famished for something they can never truly ingest or digest. It's a strikingly perfect metaphor for the addicted soul, always seeking, always consuming, yet paradoxically never truly filled. This profound emptiness persists because what is genuinely being sought isn't the substance itself, nor the fleeting pleasure of the behavior. What is truly being yearned for is the profound feeling of being whole, of being integrated, of finally experiencing a sense of inner peace and completion. It is a desperate, often unconscious, attempt to anesthetize the silent, agonizing scream of a long-ignored inner child, a part of the self that was never truly heard, seen, or unconditionally welcomed. And perhaps as these words resonate, you recognize a part of yourself in this description. Perhaps your own personal compulsion isn't for something that visibly devastates your life, something that screams addiction to the outside world. Maybe. It's something far more subtle, more cleverly disguised, more insidious, more socially accepted or even applauded. But the fundamental question remains undeniably the same. What are you instinctively trying to avoid feeling? What raw emotion, what deep-seated pain are you attempting to bypass or numb through your repetitive actions, your constant distractions, or your ceaseless pursuits? While the world at large often continues to shame and punish the outward behavior of addiction, the profound, invisible pain that relentlessly fuels it continues to fester and grow, silently beneath the surface. This is precisely why conventional treatments that focus solely on enforcing abstinence often fail, and tragically so. They courageously combat the visible symptom, but they fatally ignore the deeply embedded root cause. As long as the initial, profound wound remains open, unaddressed, and unhealed, the mind, in its primal drive for survival and relief, will inevitably continue to seek solace, distraction, or oblivion, no matter the escalating cost, no matter the mounting self-destruction. But what if the very thing you are desperately seeking out there in this substance, in the escape and the compulsive excesses, in fact, residing deeply within you? What if true, lasting relief doesn't emerge from a superficial, fleeting anesthesia, but from a profound, courageous reconnection with your own soul? This is precisely where Carl Jung's towering psychological insights become powerfully relevant. For him, addiction wasn't just a desperate attempt to escape unbearable pain. It was, at its very core, a misguided attempt to seek the sacred, for Carl Jung. Addiction was never merely a behavioral disorder, much less a simplistic matter of perceived lack of willpower. He consistently viewed it as a profound symptom of deep spiritual disorientation, an anguished cry of the soul in its desperate, often misdirected search for meaning. It was, in his view, a fervent but tragic attempt to reconnect with the self, the entire psychic totality of an individual using destructive tools that, in the end, only serve to deepen the internal schism and further fragment the psyche. Jung profoundly understood that human beings possess an innate, almost unbearable inability to live disconnected from their own central core, their inner axis. And when that vital connection is severed, whether through early life trauma, the systematic repression of authentic emotions, the pervasive weight of social conditioning, or a devastating loss of identity, the psyche, in its inherent drive towards wholeness, instinctively seeks a way to compensate. When this compensation fails to find healthy, constructive, or symbolically rich pathways for expression, it often manifests through destructive means, as relentless obsessions, debilitating compulsions, and ultimately, as various forms of addiction. It is as if the individual, having tragically lost intimate contact with their inner compass, begins to desperately seek substitutes for the sacred, for that profound sense of belonging and transcendence. Many, tragically, find this fleeting substitute in the intoxicating embrace of certain substances, or in any behavior that provokes a powerful, albeit temporary, alteration of consciousness. This was Jung's profound realization when he engaged in historic correspondence with Bill Wilson, the co-founder of the global Alcoholics Anonymous movement. In this seminal letter, Jung explained that for many, the overwhelming, undeniable craving for certain substances is, in truth, an unconscious, often deeply suppressed, yearning for a mystical experience, for an expanded state of consciousness, for a moment of genuine transcendence. He reiterated his concept of spiritus contra spiritum, the true spirit in opposition to the false spirit, where the substance tragically becomes a simulacrum of the divine. It is a bold and arguably unsettling statement, but pause and consider its profound implications. What does addiction, in its terrifying grip, ultimately offer, even if only for a brief, fleeting moment? Does it not promise a sense of relief, a glimpse of peace, an echo of ecstasy, or a powerful, albeit temporary, escape from unbearable reality? The true problem, Jung asserted, is not what the individual ensnared by addiction seeks. The problem lies fundamentally in where they are looking for it. Jung firmly believed that concealed behind every destructive compulsion lies a legitimate, noble impulse of the soul, a powerful, innate drive to return to one's authentic center, to courageously reconnect with the multifaceted self. But when this vital impulse fails to find conscious, healthy expression, whether due to systematic repression, crippling fear, unresolved trauma, or a rigid social conditioning, it finds a way to escape through the psychological cracks, manifesting as self-destructive behavior. It is, in essence, denied spirituality, returning through the shadow. This is precisely why, for Jung, true, lasting recovery cannot possibly come solely from abstinence or purely rational efforts. It must fundamentally involve a transformative journey back to the self, the arduous yet profoundly rewarding construction of a rich, symbolic life, and the courageous integration of opposing forces within the psyche. Because at its deepest core, the addicted person is someone who has tragically lost the vital thread of connection with their own soul and is desperately, albeit misguidedly, attempting to restore that connection in the only way they currently know how, by frantically seeking outside what is and has always been intrinsically within. If this content is piercing through the surface and beginning to make a new kind of sense for you, we invite you to take the next step on this journey of self-discovery. Your engagement fuels this mission to bring profound understanding to more people. Please consider subscribing to this channel. Just click the subscribe button below and enable notifications so you don't miss our upcoming explorations in the depths of the human psyche. And let's connect. We believe true understanding blossoms through shared experience. In the comments section below, tell us, "My healing begins with ... and complete that sentence with one word or a short phrase that captures what this message is stirring within you. What insight has truly resonated with your soul today? Your story matters, and it has the power to illuminate the path for others. Sure, I will provide the third block of the script, maintaining the established tone, length, and content requirements. But on this profound journey towards self-reconnection, there lies a significant, often insidious, obstacle, a hidden adversary that resides within all of us, and which frequently bears the primary responsibility for subtly, yet powerfully, pushing into the grip of addictive patterns. This unseen force in Jungian psychology is called the shadow. It is precisely this repressed content, this disowned, unlived part of the psyche, that largely fuels addictive behaviors, serving as a constant, insistent pressure cooker beneath the surface of consciousness. The shadow is comprised of everything that, at various points in your life, you were implicitly or explicitly taught should be hidden, denied, or forgotten. It encompasses a vast spectrum: anger, shame, raw fear, intense desire, profound sadness, innate vulnerability, unbridled power, deep sexuality, surging ambition. Anything that wasn't wholeheartedly accepted or embraced by your family system. Your cultural environment or your religious upbringing was systematically pushed deep into. The recesses of your mind relegated to the psychological basement. You're not weak. You're not fundamentally broken. What you feel, this relentless compulsion that seems to loom larger than your very being, this insatiable need that dictates your choices, this profound emptiness that stubbornly insists on returning, this is not a sign of madness. It is not a mark of personal failure, nor is it a moral defect etched into your character. What you are experiencing in its rawest form is pain, and every single instance of pain, whether sharp or dull, visible, or hidden, possesses a definitive origin. Carl Jung, one of the most profound explorers of the human soul, offered a revolutionary perspective, suggesting that many of what we label as vices or destructive habits are not merely self-sabotaging behaviors. Instead, he proposed they are desperate, often misguided, attempts to reconnect with something sacred, to touch the divine, to fulfill a fundamental spiritual longing that has been tragically frustrated. In one of his most widely recognized letters, penned to a luminary figure involved in the foundational work of a recovery organization for alcohol dependency, articulated his conviction with startling directness. Addiction, he asserted, is fundamentally a frustrated spiritual quest. It is the soul in its deepest essence, crying out for genuine meaning, yearning to touch the infinite, to experience transcendence, yet tragically finding only temporary solace in intoxicating substances. Compulsive behaviors, overwhelming excess, or destabilizing chaos. Jung famously described this internal battle as spiritus contra spiritum, the true, authentic spirit warring against the false, counterfeit spirit, a desperate search for something true found in what ultimately deceives. Echoing this profound insight from a different, yet equally compassionate vantage point is Dr. Gabor Mate, a revered physician and compassionate healer who has dedicated an extensive portion of his life, more than 4 decades, to plumbing the depths of human suffering and understanding the genesis of addiction. His central thesis is startling, simple yet revolutionary. The question is not why addiction. The question is why the pain? For Dr. Mate, addiction itself is never the primary problem. Instead, he views it as a deeply ingrained solution, a coping mechanism that an individual painstakingly constructs to navigate an overwhelming, often unacknowledged, trauma that continues to reside, dormant or active, within their very being. If you take a courageous moment to honestly observe the intricate narrative of your own life, you might come to this startling realization yourself. You might recognize that the profound, often inexplicable, force that propels you to repeatedly engage in the same destructive patterns, to unconsciously sabotage your own well-being, to endlessly flee from your authentic self, is not, at its core, a pursuit of fleeting pleasure. Instead, it is a relentless search for anesthesia, a desperate attempt to numb an unbearable internal ache. This video is not intended as a lecture. It is not a pronouncement of judgment. It is, purely, and simply, a mirror. Here, we will courageously look together at what you may have instinctively avoided confronting for a long, perhaps agonizing time. We will speak openly about the intricate psychological processes that unfold behind the veil of addiction. Whether that addiction manifests as a reliance on substances like chemical compounds or stimulating beverages, an unhealthy relationship with food, an obsessive engagement with intimate acts, an incessant devotion to professional endeavors, compulsive consumption, or even a chronic, relentless pursuit of constant digital distraction. Because, at a fundamental level, all of these seemingly disparate behaviors are merely desperate attempts to fill the very same profound void within the soul. Ancient wisdom traditions, such as Buddhism, eloquently speak of the realm of hungry ghosts, archetypal beings depicted with tiny mouths, perpetually narrow throats and enormous, insatiable stomachs, eternally starving for something that, despite relentless consumption, never truly arrives. Dr. Gabor Mate powerfully employs this poignant metaphor to describe the quintessential experience of the addicted individual, someone who experiences an insatiable, gnawing hunger for genuine connection, for authentic presence, for a true sense of belonging. Yet, tragically, not knowing where or how to truly find these fundamental human needs. They seek fleeting relief in whatever is immediately available, whatever offers even a momentary escape, even if that illusory relief ultimately costs them everything they hold dear. Perhaps as you hear these words, you find yourself utterly exhausted. Perhaps you are wrestling with the agonizing question of whether a genuine way out truly exists. I am not here to offer you an effortless, miraculous cure, nor to promise a journey devoid of challenges. But I guarantee you one thing with absolute certainty. There's a path forward, and that transformative path begins the moment you truly internalize and understand that addiction is merely a symptom, not the root disease itself. Your pain is not a dead end. It is, in its deepest essence, a powerful calling. And if you possess the extraordinary courage to truly listen to its silent, persistent voice, you may discover a profoundly different life. A life of authenticity and wholeness waiting patiently on the other side of your struggle. Let us embark on this journey together, because truly understanding addiction is, at its core, understanding yourself. And this understanding, this profound self-recognition, possesses the unparalleled power to change absolutely everything. Addiction does not begin with the substance itself. It originates with pain. Before the very first instance of self-medication, before the first desperate escape, before the onset of the first compulsive behavior, there existed a body in profound suffering, a heart that had been profoundly neglected, a scared, confused, deeply lonely child who learned far too early in life that the vast and often indifferent world was not, in fact, a safe or nurturing place. Dr. Gabor Mate, the Hungarian-Canadian physician, dedicated more than 4 decades of his life to intimately working with individuals whom society had largely chosen to forget. Homeless people struggling on the streets, individuals grappling with chronic substance dependencies, patients who felt utterly abandoned by conventional healthcare systems and even their own families. And what he discovered consistently and without exception was a unifying thread. Every single one of them, without fail, carried a deep, unhealed emotional wound. Many had endured severe abuse, profound neglect, persistent emotional deprivation, physical violence, or were simply deprived of the consistent, unconditional love and attuned emotional presence that is essential for healthy development. Even those who did not experience severe, classically defined traumas still live through experiences of profound emotional disconnection. Experiences significant enough to profoundly reshape their developing brains towards a predisposition for suffering. According to Dr. Mate, addiction is fundamentally the desperate attempt to alleviate that unbearable pain. He famously states, "The real question is never why addiction, but rather why the pain?" And that transformative question, truly considered, changes everything. Because when you grasp this fundamental truth, you cease to view addictive behavior as a mere whim, a sign of weakness, or a foolish choice. Instead, you begin to perceive it as a legitimate, albeit ultimately destructive, response to legitimate, often unbearable, pain. Sure, I will provide the second block of the script, ensuring it's approximately 1,500 words, maintains the established tone, and includes a natural mantra CTA, as well as the specific subscription and engagement request. At the end of the block dot, the brain of someone navigating addiction isn't inherently weak. On the contrary, it's a brain that has learned, with remarkable efficiency, to protect itself from an overwhelming internal landscape. When a person uses a substance or dives into a compulsive behavior, their body immediately releases dopamine. that powerful neurotransmitter associated with reward, pleasure, and, crucially, survival. It's the very same intricate system that's activated when we experience the profound sensations of love, genuine acceptance, or deep connection. But for a great many individuals caught in the grip of addiction, those fundamental, life-affirming experiences were tragically absent during formative years. Or perhaps they were consistently painful, unreliable, or simply insufficient. Consequently, the brain, in its relentless drive to seek relief and maintain a semblance of equilibrium, learns to pursue that same powerful sense of soothing and reward elsewhere in the fleeting rush of certain substances, in the temporary oblivion offered by excessive consumption, in the fabricated intimacy of online interactions, or in the artificial highs of accumulating possessions or professional achievements. The false promise of relief becomes a learned pathway, a default, setting for a nervous system desperate for peace. However, the act of repressing something, of banishing it from conscious awareness, does not mean it ceases to exist. Quite the contrary. What is forcibly banished from consciousness merely begins to operate with even greater potency and stealth, in the shadows, exerting an indirect, compulsive, and often deeply self-destructive influence on your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. Jung famously articulated this truth when he stated, "What you do not make conscious will manifest in your life as fate." Addiction, in this critical context, is not an act of free, unburdened choice. It is, tragically, the profound symptom of a divided psyche, a soul torn by internal conflict. It is the shadow, with its undeniable power, relentlessly demanding passage, insisting on being seen and integrated. It is the swallowed anger that metastasizes into internal explosions of self-sabotage. It is the unprocessed pain that transforms into an insatiable compulsion. It is the suffocated vulnerability that desperately disguises itself as a need for anesthesia. A numbing oblivion. Take a moment to truly reflect on your own experiences. How many times have you found yourself repeating behaviors you vehemently swore to abandon, only to find yourself inexplicably drawn back to them? How many instances have there been where you knowingly sabotaged your own well-being, even when your rational mind screamed that it would harm you? How often have you felt utterly possessed by an overwhelming force that seemed vastly greater than your own willpower, a force that compelled you despite your best intentions? This isn't merely a lack of discipline, a simple deficiency in self-control. This is the raw, potent energy of unconscious content relentlessly trying to surface, struggling to emerge into the light of awareness. And here's the crucial, often painful paradox. The more vehemently you struggle to repress it, to keep it locked away, the stronger and more insistent it becomes, gaining an almost tyrannical hold over your choices. Addiction, therefore, often settles in as a desperate, albeit destructive, way to contain this internal explosion. It acts as a perverse pressure valve for everything that your conscious mind either refuses to acknowledge or genuinely feels incapable of facing directly. And herein lies the profound trap. As long as you continue to perceive and treat addiction as the ultimate enemy, as the singular problem to be vanquished, you will only ever be fighting the symptom, never reaching the root cause. The true root of the suffering lies far deeper. It is lodged within the very things you are most unwilling to look at, within the unsettling terrain of shadow you fear to touch. But it is precisely in that feared, often maligned territory that the authentic, lasting healing resides. The journey of deep recovery, the path to genuine wholeness, demands an extraordinary act of courage, the willingness to embark on a descent, to traverse the murky depths of your own psyche, to courageously name and acknowledge what has been hidden for so long. It is undoubtedly painful. It is undeniably uncomfortable. It is often a profoundly solitary and at times brutal process. But it is, with every fiber of your being, real, and it is absolutely necessary. This transformative process necessitates a complete and radical shift in posture, a fundamental reorientation of your inner stance. It requires you to step entirely out of the old, self-defeating logic of war against oneself, the relentless internal monologue that proclaims, I need. To conquer this addiction, I must conquer my impulses. Instead, it invites you to step into a new, liberating logic of reconciliation. From this new perspective, addiction is no longer an enemy to be brutally destroyed. It becomes instead a distorted and painful messenger, a paradoxical guide that points with unerring accuracy to the precise location of your deepest, most unhealed wound. The very substance or behavior that has been destroying your life is simultaneously the very thing that reveals the path that desperately needs to be taken. It shows you precisely where it hurts, where there is a profound lack, where the soul bleeds silently. And this journey, make no mistake, is not merely psychological. It is profoundly spiritual, because addiction, at its deepest core, is a profound crisis of meaning, a failed and desperate attempt to reconnect with something greater than oneself, to find a sense of belonging and transcendence that feels absent. The individual caught in the throes of addiction is, in essence, someone exiled from themselves, profoundly disconnected from their authentic self, fragmented and broken on the inside. Recovery, therefore, transcends merely stopping the use of a substance or ceasing a destructive behavior. It is a far grander undertaking. It is about painstakingly reconstituting that lost wholeness. It is about integrating the disparate, fragmented parts of the psyche. It is about courageously returning to inhabit one's own authentic center, to once again feel at home within your own skin. But this profound return, this radical act of self-reclamation, is only possible when the underlying pain is bravely traversed, not skillfully avoided. And this courageous traversal only truly happens in moments of profound silence, in the raw confrontation with the terrifying void, in the brave abandonment of cherished illusions. One must, in a very real sense, die to the old, fragmented identity and be reborn, not as someone miraculously cured of all past struggles, but as someone truly whole, someone who no longer needs to relentlessly flee, who can, for the very first time, finally be truly present in their own life with all its mésalliances and beauty. This rebirth, however, does not occur in a single instantaneous flash. It is meticulously built, little by little, with persistent awareness, with unwavering support from compassionate others, and with the courageous cultivation of genuine presence in each moment. And it is only truly possible when the person unequivocally understands that they are not inherently broken. They are simply profoundly disconnected. They are not inherently bad. They are simply deeply wounded. And they are not alone. They are like all of us, seeking a way back home to their deepest, truest selves. Before the very concept of addiction existed, there was abandonment. Before the onset of compulsive behavior, there was a profound absence. Before the devastating grip of substance misuse, there was an unbearable pain, a pain that lacked a name, but screamed relentlessly in the silent language of the body. And this is precisely where our journey of understanding must begin, at the very origin of that wound. Because no one, absolutely no one, is born addicted. Addiction is at its heart an adaptation, a remarkably creative, albeit ultimately destructive, response of the psyche to an often unbearable or unmanageable reality. Dr. Gabor Mate is incisive and profoundly truthful in his now famous statement. The opposite addiction is not sobriety. It is connection. And this statement, in its elegant simplicity, carries a deeply unsettling truth. Most individuals grappling with addiction are not primarily seeking fleeting pleasure. They are desperately seeking relief from chronic loneliness, from pervasive feelings of inadequacy, from the searing anguish of not feeling genuinely loved, truly seen, or deeply belonging. This profound pain rarely originates in adulthood. It is often born in the tender crucible of childhood, in the incredibly formative early years of life, often even before we possess the language to articulate its presence. Scientific understanding, now overwhelmingly confirms that these early years of development profoundly shape the very architecture of the human brain. A child's delicate nervous system meticulously organizes itself based on the emotional experiences it receives. If a child grows surrounded by consistent love, unwavering acceptance, and attuned emotional presence, their brain develops robust circuits of safety, trust, and healthy regulation. But if that same child grows in an environment characterized by pervasive neglect, emotional instability, chronic abuse, or profound emotional coldness, those critical circuits become dysfunctional, miswired. The child tragically learns that the world is inherently unsafe, and even worse, they learn that their pain, their deepest suffering, will not be genuinely cared for or alleviated. I will now provide the final block of the script, completing the four-block structure. This block will maintain the established tone, complete the narrative, and deliver the final subscription and community engagement CTAs in the unique, warm, and inviting style requested. But trauma is not strictly limited to only major catastrophic events. One doesn't need to have endured overt physical violence or explicit, undeniable abuse to be profoundly traumatized. What truly constitutes trauma, at its most fundamental level, is the subjective experience of helplessness. It is that moment when the emotional system becomes utterly overwhelmed by something it cannot possibly process. And that raw, unprocessed experience remains frozen, trapped within the very fabric of the body. And this is precisely where addiction, in its insidious embrace, steps in as a desperate, albeit ultimately futile, attempt to regulate what has never been adequately regulated, to soothe the nervous system that has been wired for constant threat. Imagine addiction as a kind of emotional prosthesis. It arises precisely where genuine containment was tragically lacking, where there was no consistent, nurturing presence, where there was no deeply empathic listening. It offers, albeit temporarily, the very things the inner child desperately pleaded for and heartbreakingly did not receive. Fleeting relief, a deceptive sense of control, a fragile, temporary comfort. The use of the substance or the engagement in the compulsive behavior momentarily calms the dysregulated nervous system. It brings a false sense of belonging, an illusory feeling of power, a counterfeit peace. But it is a profoundly fragile relief, one that consistently comes at an increasingly steep and devastating price. The very body of the person. Navigating addiction carries memories that the conscious mind often struggles to recall or actively forgets. Memories of persistent tension, of profound emotional abandonment, of an overwhelming sense of not feeling worthy of love or belonging. This is precisely why deep, transformative recovery cannot afford to ignore the body. Because it is within the body that trauma truly lives, where the unhealed wound silently pulses, and it is through the body, in its somatic wisdom, that genuine healing must ultimately occur. Addiction, then, is less a standalone disease and more desperate, intricate attempt at self-regulation, at sheer survival, at coping with a profound, often invisible, pain that no one else ever truly saw or acknowledged. And when you truly grasp this fundamental understanding, something profound shifts within you. Paralyzing guilt begins to give way to profound compassion, and the heavy shroud of shame starts, little by little, to dissolve. But there remains one utterly essential element missing from this understanding: confrontation. Because simply understanding the origin of addiction is not enough to break its grip. It is absolutely necessary to courageously traverse this painful territory, to descend into the very root of the pain. Carl Jung famously stated that no tree grows to the sky without its roots touching hell. And this hell in the journey of overcoming addiction is not merely metaphorical. It is real, concrete, and deeply felt in the flesh. It is the courageous plunge into one's own conscious depths. It is the agonizing, yet ultimately liberating, reunion with everything that has been denied, forgotten, locked away, but that has never, for a single moment, ceased to exist. True healing, begins when the individual bravely ceases their relentless flight. When, perhaps for the very first time, they courageously accept to truly look at the pain instead of frantically anesthetizing. It begins when they profoundly understand that the insatiable hunger that never truly dissipates, that agonizing hole that nothing external seems to fill, will not magically disappear with another dose. Another compulsive click, another fleeting purchase, or another distracting escape. It will only begin to stop hurting when it is genuinely heard, acknowledged, and integrated. This descent into oneself is, above all, a profound act of courage. It means facing the shadow head-on, recognizing one's own internal ghosts without masks or pretense, sitting patiently with raw anguish, searing guilt and profound shame, and enduring the intense discomfort of being utterly naked before oneself. It is not a pretty process. It is not quick. It is often profoundly lonely, sometimes brutal. But it is real, and it is absolutely necessary for authentic liberation. This transformative process demands a complete and radical change of internal posture. It requires stepping entirely out of the old, self-defeating logic of war against oneself, the relentless internal monologue that dictates, I must conquer this addiction. I need to conquer my impulses. Instead, it calls you to enter a new liberating logic of reconciliation. From this new perspective, addiction is no longer an enemy to be ruthlessly destroyed. It is, instead, a powerful messenger, a distorted and painful guide that points with unerring precision to the exact location of the wound. The very substance or behavior that seemingly destroys is paradoxically the same one that reveals. It shows the precise path that needs to be taken. It illuminates where it hurts, where there is a profound lack, where the soul bleeds silently. And this journey, make no mistake, is not just psychological. It is profoundly spiritual. Because addiction is, at its deepest core, a profound crisis of meaning, a failed attempt to reconnect with something infinitely greater than oneself. The individual navigating addiction is someone exiled from themselves, profoundly disconnected from their authentic self, fragmented and internally torn. Recovery, then, transcends merely abandoning a substance or ceasing a destructive behavior. It is a far grander, more arduous undertaking. It is about painstakingly reconstituting that lost wholeness. It is about integrating the disparate, fragmented parts of the psyche. It is about courageously returning to inhabit one's own authentic center, to once again feel truly at home within your own skin. But this profound return, this radical act of self-reclamation, is only possible when the underlying pain is bravely traversed, not skillfully avoided. And this courageous traversal only truly happens in moments of profound silence. In the raw confrontation with the terrifying void, in the brave abandonment of cherished illusions. One must, in a very real sense, die to the old, fragmented identity and be reborn, not as someone miraculously cured of all past struggles, but as someone truly whole, someone who no longer needs to relentlessly flee, who can, for the very first time, finally be truly present in their own life, with all its mésalliances and beauty. This rebirth, however, does not occur in a single, instantaneous flash. It is meticulously built, little by little, with persistent awareness, with unwavering support from compassionate others, and with the courageous cultivation of genuine presence in each moment. And it is only truly possible when the person unequivocally understands that they are not inherently broken. They are simply profoundly disconnected. They are not inherently bad. They are simply deeply wounded, and they are not alone. They are, like all of us, seeking a way back home to their deepest, truest selves. There is a dangerous illusion surrounding the idea of recovery, a fantasy aggressively sold by simplistic self-help slogans and hasty, superficial speeches. The notion that it is possible to overcome addiction solely through sheer willpower, optimistic positive thinking, or mere habit modification. But the truth is profoundly different, and it is often harsh. The true healing process is not an effortless upward climb. It is, without exception, a descent. Carl Jung made this abundantly clear with one of his most powerful and unsettling phrases. No tree grows to the sky without its roots touching hell. And this hell in a journey of overcoming addiction is not a mere metaphor. It is terrifyingly real, concrete, and deeply felt in the very fabric of the body. It is the courageous plunge into one's own conscious depths. It is the agonizing yet ultimately liberating reunion with everything that has been relentlessly denied, intentionally forgotten, or brutally locked away, but that has never for a single moment ceased to exist. Healing genuinely begins when the individual bravely ceases their desperate flight, when, for the very first time, they consciously choose to look at the pain instead of frantically anesthetizing it. It begins when they understand, with profound clarity, that the insatiable hunger that never truly dissipates, that agonizing hole that no external distraction can ever truly fill, will not miraculously vanish with another dose, another compulsive click, another fleeting purchase, or another distracting escape. It will only stop hurting when it is finally heard, acknowledged, and embraced. When someone truly liberates themselves from a compulsive behavior, what is broken is not just the binding tie with a substance or an old habit. It is the profound pact with the lie, the insidious belief that you need to numb yourself to simply exist, to navigate life. For a long, perhaps agonizing time, you may have believed that this was simply the way it is, that there was no conceivable way out, that whatever controlled you was simply stronger than your will. And in a terrifying way, it was because the pain you carried was also older than you. It was the pain of the child who was not genuinely welcomed, of the adolescent who was systematically silenced, of the adult who learned to smile outwardly while crumbling inwardly. But now, perhaps for the very first time, you have begun to see this pain with entirely different eyes, not as a crippling weakness, but as a crucial sign, as an urgent call. You are not your addiction. You are not the endless repetition of your perceived failures. You are the profound awareness that observes all of this, and little by little, painstakingly learns to choose differently, to respond consciously rather than react compulsively. And this vital awareness only truly awakens when the anesthesia loses its function, when the internal void can no longer be filled with superficial distractions, when the emptiness finally begins to be courageously inhabited with truth, with genuine presence, with profound silence. Jung teaches us that the soul does not relentlessly seek perfection, but rather wholeness. This means that true healing does not depend on the impossible task of eliminating your shadows, but on the courageous and integrating act of embracing them, of weaving them back into the tapestry of your complete self. What truly makes you strong is not the complete absence of pain, but the unwavering willingness to feel it, to sit with it, without frantically fleeing from it. And that in itself is already a profound miracle. If you have made it this far, it is because something powerful within you truly yearns to change. Something within you is already actively changing. And that profound courage deserves to be profoundly recognized. The journey ahead is undoubtedly long. It demands immense patience, unwavering humility, and boundless courage. But it is profoundly possible, and above all, it is unequivocally worth every single step. If this video has spoken to your soul, if at any moment you felt profoundly seen, understood, or genuinely moved, then your journey towards self-discovery is truly in motion. And if you want to continue this profound process, this deep dive, this courageous crossing towards your authentic self, then watch our next video. It is an important, direct continuation of this path, a vital piece that completes the cycle we've begun here today. Don't forget to like this video. Share it with someone you know who needs to hear this message, and most importantly, generously. Subscribe to the channel, because this is not just a channel about psychology. It is a sacred space for awakening. And you, in your deepest essence, deserve to be awake. Let's walk this path of wholeness together.